a lot of times people kind of come to us thinking of ESPP or employee stock purchase plans as a no-brainer, right? Your company gives you a 5, 10, 15% discount on the stock. And you're like, well, yeah, $100 a share and I get to buy it for 85. Like, that's great. But then they don't do anything with it. And it just sits there. And it's like, well, is the stock going to go up or is it going to go down? Right.
Right. And I think that's where, people just have these options, so they take it, or RSUs just happen to them, so they take it, and don't necessarily do anything else. And I think that's where the proactivity needs to be inserted into the plan of saying, okay, we're going to have guardrails for the options available. We're going to maximize, any option that's advantageous to our plan, but then we're going to have guardrails for how we're going to diversify and utilize this within the big picture plan.
Right. It's far too common for people to rely on gut feelings. And we just as humans are susceptible to anchoring, right? So it's not an uncommon story for me to talk to someone who, they had stock come into their possession through some form at $80 a share, say, and stock's at 60, right? But they've anchored to 80. And so now they're saying, well,
Mhm.
how do I make up that money? And that's just the entirely wrong question. It's rather, what is the concentration of this asset in my plan? And what are the tax impacts of buying or of selling versus holding? Those are the right questions, not am I making up against this, you know, arbitrary buy point.
Yes, and this is distinguishing between gut feelings versus guardrails, right? So my gut feeling of I will wait until the stock hits X, gets to this price. Or I'm just gonna wait for the next earnings call. I'm just gonna I don't want to regret anything. And so that's these gut feelings, right? And it can be, it can roll into a lot of things, especially when you're having conversations with your coworkers. So these are gut feelings versus having guardrails, right? And looking at the big picture and saying, okay, as far as single stock concentration risk, one company, I only want to have X percentage, at Abundance, we use 10% of our overall portfolio. And what I mean by overall portfolio is every account, every investment account that you own. I only want 10% to be in this one company because that's the risk my retirement can afford. That's the risk my plan can afford. And so then it's what strategies are we using to sell? Maybe it's at vest, maybe it's a year after vest to utilize long-term capital gains versus short-term. So it's there's strategies underlying, but it's this 10% guardrail and saying, okay, that I'm not going over 10%.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's worth mentioning that both individual sentiment about a company and desire to take risk on the company, as well as a person's objective financial plan play into that number, right? So like you said something important, which is the amount of risk your plan can afford, right? So that percentage might differ based on how much risk your plan can afford. It also might differ based on how much you want to put into your company. And sometimes people do really want to try to invest in their company's growth, but we want to do that smart.
Right, and sometimes we're using the ESPP for the discount and then we're strategically selling it. We're just using it as a indoor outdoor. And that's where it's okay, we're taking the emotion away and we're putting a methodical mindset to this. And so we use equity compensation. We use, we put what we have to maximize for employer to use. It's just we have guardrails and we have strategies that fit within a bigger plan. Um, and also I think positioning your risk. So we're talking about single stock concentration risk and having that risk or single stock in the right bucket. And we have seen this in countless plans. One client recently comes to mind who had a significant gain of a single company stock in, the taxable brokerage space, which is a lot of times where that's a lot of times where your employer will put your employer stock, or you might be building something up in your Fidelity brokerage, and so this account is taxable, right? That's not where we want to take our significant concentration risk. If a client's aptitude or comfortability with risk is high and they're tolerant, then we want to take those single stocks and put them in a vehicle like a Roth where all those gains can grow tax free, right? Versus in a taxable account where if we actually do hit it big with taking more risk and we see that reward, we don't want it in a taxable account typically. again, depends on your financial plan, but typically we would want it in a Roth so that all of that risk and reward can pay off by tax-free growth, tax-free withdrawals.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one can hardly be underscored enough. Again, the default mode is that you're acquiring this all in the taxable space. So that means every dollar that you gain above the basis or the amount that you acquired the stock for is taxed at capital gains rate in the taxable space. So if we're thinking strategically for somebody, it again fits in their retirement plan. We're certainly not putting all of their retirement into stocks, right? But if we're saying, okay, you have a desire to take some risk, take some bets, take that in the Roth space because that allows any growth to be tax free. And if we are talking about years and decades, and we're talking about tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of gains, then we're talking about tens of thousands of tax saved over that time period. So yeah, don't underestimate the power of where you house your risk.